There are days in life that etch themselves into your memory forever, moments when the truth cuts deeper than any blade. For me, it was the day I realized I meant nothing to the person who meant everything to me. What began as trust turned into betrayal, and what felt like love transformed into silence. This is not just a story of heartbreak, but of revelation, where every smile hid a secret and every promise carried a lie. The messages started off like whispers in the night, small enough to ignore, subtle enough to brush aside, but heavy enough to leave a strange weight pressing against the back of my mind. At first I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking, the way people do when love makes them fragile. Kaylin Dreven had always been careful with words, always the kind of person who carried charm like a shield, so nothing ever seemed out of place. But the more I looked, the more I realized that some words were meant for me and some were not. It began with the phone lighting up at odd hours, messages that he wouldn't open in front of me, screens tilted away like secrets weren't spilling through them. When I asked who it was, he'd shrug, give a casual answer, and move on as if I was being dramatic. Maybe I wanted to believe him. Maybe I wanted to believe that people who mean everything to you can't possibly be the kind of people who hide things in shadows. Yet, in the quiet, my instincts screamed louder than his reassurances. The first time I saw a message that wasn't meant for me, it was by accident. His phone was on the table, buzzing with a name I didn't recognize. My hand hesitated before picking it up. Curiosity battling guilt, suspicion fighting trust. But when my eyes caught the words glowing against the screen, something inside me cracked. It wasn't explicit, not even romantic, but it was intimate in a way that shouldn't have been. Inside jokes I didn't understand, conversations I wasn't a part of, and phrases dripping with a familiarity that told me this wasn't new. It wasn't a slip. It was a pattern. That night I didn't say anything. I watched him as he laughed, as he told me stories, as he leaned in close with that same warmth I had memorized. But behind every smile, I saw the ghost of those messages lingering in the corners of my mind. I wondered if his laugh was genuine or rehearsed, if his arms around me were a comfort or a distraction. Every time he looked into my eyes, I questioned if he was seeing me at all, or if his thoughts were already somewhere else, with someone else. Days stretched into weeks, and the messages grew bolder. I noticed the change in his habits, the way he guarded his phone as if it carried a piece of him I was no longer allowed to see. He started stepping outside to take calls, his voice lowered, his back turned. The rhythm of our conversation shifted, replaced with silence or shallow exchanges that skimmed the surface. Whenever I asked what was wrong, he would smile, that same disarming smile, and tell me I was imagining things. But deep inside, I knew the truth was buried in those hidden words, locked away in a device I could never fully reach. The breaking point wasn't dramatic, not at first. It was a quiet evening, just the two of us sitting together when his phone lit up again. This time it wasn't just words, it was a picture. A picture of someone smiling at him in a way I thought only I did. He caught me seeing it, and for the first time his mask slipped. His hand moved quickly to hide the screen, his face tightening just enough for me to catch the flicker of panic. That flicker told me more than the messages ever could. I remember the way the air shifted around us, heavy and suffocating. I remember the silence that followed, thick with everything we weren't saying. My heart was beating so hard it hurt, and in that moment, the realization clawed its way in. There was a part of Kaylin's life I had never been invited into, a part that was alive and thriving while I sat believing I was his world. I wasn't his world. I was an option, a convenience, a shadow standing beside the real light he had chosen to follow elsewhere. The hidden messages weren't just words anymore. They were proof that love can coexist with lies, that trust can be shattered without a single confrontation, that someone can hold you close while drifting further away with every stolen conversation. Each buzz of his phone felt like a dagger, each notification a reminder that I was slipping out of a place I thought was mine. I began noticing everything I had ignored before. The late replies, the distracted looks, the sudden bursts of laughter he never explained. I replayed memories in my head, dissecting them for signs I had missed. Every tender moment now felt contaminated, every kiss tainted with the possibility that it wasn't meant for me alone. I tried to find comfort in the idea that maybe I was wrong, that maybe the messages weren't what they seemed, but the truth was louder than my denial. I realized then that hidden messages aren't always written on screens. Sometimes, they live in the pauses of conversations, in the way someone avoids your gaze, in the subtle distance that grows between two people who once felt inseparable. And the cruelest part is how easily love blinds you to them until it's too late. until you're drowning in the silence that those secrets create. The trust I had built with Kaylin Drevin wasn't just broken, it was shattered in a way that left sharp edges everywhere I turned. Trust is supposed to be the foundation of love, the invisible thread holding two hearts together, but when it frays, it doesn't snap cleanly. It tears piece by piece, leaving behind a mess you can't stitch back the same way again. That's how it felt with him. Every time I looked at him after the messages, I no longer saw the man who once made me feel safe. I saw someone I couldn't recognize, someone who had learned how to play with my heart, like it was nothing more than a fragile glass ornament he could drop at will. Shattering wasn't just about the hidden words, it was about everything they represented. I had shared my fears, my dreams, my unfiltered self with him. I thought vulnerability was strength when given to the right person, but standing in the ruins of what we had, I realized vulnerability was just a weapon in the wrong hands. He had promised me a future, whispered words about forever, looked me in the eyes and said I was his everything. But if I was truly his everything, then who were those messages for? And why did his silence cut me deeper than his lies? It started to show in little cracks at first. I'd ask him where he had been, and he'd offer vague answers, short phrases that used to mean nothing but now carried the weight of betrayal. He began avoiding conversations, dodging questions, turning my need for reassurance into an inconvenience. I told myself I was being paranoid, that love requires patience, but what love demands patience with secrets? What love thrives on deception? The thought twisted inside me until every touch, every laugh, every late-night word felt like it belonged to someone else. There was a night I'll never forget, one where we sat across from each other at the table. His phone buzzed again, and instead of looking at me, his eyes darted to it. That tiny flicker of attention, so quick, so instinctive, broke something in me. It was such a small thing, but it said everything. In that second, I understood what it meant to be replaced in someone's life without even being told. I wasn't his first thought anymore. I wasn't his comfort. I wasn't even his secret. I was simply there, while his real world lived somewhere else, behind the glow of a screen I wasn't allowed to see. The worst part of shattered trust isn't the anger. It's the doubt. I doubted myself more than I doubted him. Was I not enough? Was I too much? Did I miss the signs all along? I replayed every memory like a film on loop, searching for clues that would explain why I wasn't the person he chose anymore. It's a cruel thing, how betrayal doesn't just poison how you see the other person, it poisons how you see yourself. I looked in the mirror and wondered what was wrong with me, when the truth was that it was never about me at all. But knowing that didn't soften the ache. Every time he reached for me, I flinched, not because I didn't love him, but because I no longer knew if his hand carried the warmth of love or the coldness of guilt. His words, once a source of comfort, now felt hollow, rehearsed, dripping with the kind of emptiness only lies can create. The silence between us grew longer, heavier, like we were standing in the same room but on opposite ends of an unspoken war. I began noticing his indifference. He stopped asking about my day, stopped noticing the small things he once claimed made him love me. Where there was once laughter, there was now tension. Where there was once closeness, there was distance. And every time I tried to reach across that distance, I cut myself on the shards of broken trust he had left behind. It wasn't one single moment that destroyed me. It was the accumulation of 1,000 small betrayals. The unanswered questions, the deflected conversations, the way he made me feel like I was crazy for noticing what was right in front of me. Gaslighting in the softest form, convincing me that my instincts were lies, that the pain in my chest was just insecurity, when in truth, it was the sound of trust breaking apart. Shattered trust is loud even in silence. It screams at you when you're alone, whispers in your ear when you try to sleep, and echoes in the pit of your stomach every time you try to believe things can go back to how they were. With Kaylin, I realized there was no going back. What we had wasn't just cracked, it was destroyed beyond repair. And no matter, the encounter wasn't planned, at least not by me. It was one of those moments that the universe seems to orchestrate when you least expect it, when you're least prepared to face the truth staring back at you. Kaylin Drevin had been more distant than ever, his excuses stacking up like bricks in a wall I could no longer see through. Late nights at work, sudden errands, vague promises that he'd explain later. Every explanation was short, rushed, stitched together with just enough detail to keep me from asking too many questions. But suspicion has a way of sharpening your senses, and that's how I found myself standing on a street I didn't usually walk, staring at a truth I had been avoiding for far too long. It was raining lightly, the kind of rain that clung to your skin and chilled your bones. I had left home earlier than usual, telling myself I needed fresh air, though what I really needed was clarity. My steps felt heavier with every turn, as if my body already knew what my heart wasn't ready to admit. And then, through the blur of rain and city lights, I saw him. Kalen. His figure was unmistakable, tall and familiar, the kind of silhouette I could recognize even in a crowd. But he wasn't alone. Beside him was someone else, a figure leaning in too close, their laughter spilling out in a way I hadn't heard from Kalen in months. His posture was relaxed, his smile effortless, and for a moment I felt like an intruder in a life I didn't recognize. That smile used to belong to me. That laughter used to echo in our home. Now it was being shared freely, recklessly with someone who wasn't me. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and I froze in the shadows of the street, watching the man who once swore I was his everything live as though I meant nothing at all. I wanted to look away, to turn back before the image burned itself into my mind, but I couldn't. My body betrayed me, anchoring me to the spot as their movements painted a story I had been too afraid to piece together. Their heads tilted closer when they spoke, their hands brushing in casual touches that spoke volumes. It wasn't a business meeting, it wasn't a friendly exchange, it was intimacy, unspoken but undeniable. And in that moment, every hidden message, every late-night silence, every excuse made sense in a way that shattered me all over again. The sound of their laughter felt louder than the rain. I could barely hear anything else, just that cruel reminder that joy existed in him still, just not with me. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but the ache was too strong. My eyes burned, not from the rain but from the betrayal unfolding before me. My first instinct was to run to him, to demand an explanation, to ask how he could look at me with love one day, and at someone else with the same expression the next. But something inside stopped me. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the crushing realization that I didn't need to hear his excuses anymore. The truth was right there in front of me, as raw and merciless as the storm above. Kalen reached out then, brushing a strand of hair from the other person's face. A gesture so gentle, so familiar it tore me apart. That was mine. That softness, that care, that intimacy, it used to be reserved for me. And now, seeing it given so freely to another, I understood the full extent of how invisible I had become in his life. I wasn't his confidant, his comfort, his partner anymore. I was the shadow he returned to when the world grew quiet, while the light of his real affection belonged elsewhere. I don't remember how long I stood there. Seconds felt like hours, each one dragging me deeper into the realization that love doesn't always die loudly. Sometimes it slips away silently, transferring from one person to another without a single word spoken. And sometimes you're left standing in the rain, watching the pieces of your world fall into place in the cruelest way possible. When Kalen finally walked away with that person, their arms brushing in a way that screamed closeness, I stayed behind. The street was empty again, but the silence it left was deafening. My mind replayed the scene again and again like a cruel reel I couldn't shut off. The secret encounter had ripped the last thread of denial from me, leaving me exposed, raw, and drowning in the truth I could no longer avoid. It hit me all at once, like a storm I couldn't escape. The weight of everything I had seen, everything I had felt, came crashing down on me in the silence of my own room. The walls felt too close, the air too heavy, and no matter how deeply I tried to breathe, it was never enough. My chest tightened until it hurt, until each inhale felt like a struggle against a world that no longer made sense. Kalen Dreven's face lingered in my mind, the smile he gave to someone else, the touch he once reserved for me, and it tore through me in waves, relentless and unforgiving. The tears came without warning, spilling hot and fast, blurring my vision as if the world itself didn't want me to see it clearly anymore. I tried to stop them, to bite them back, but they only grew stronger the harder I resisted. My body shook, my hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms as if pain could anchor me, as if physical hurt could distract me from the chaos tearing through my heart. But it didn't. Nothing did. I fell onto the bed, curling into myself, hugging my knees as if I could hold my own broken pieces together. My breath came out in jagged sobs, each one louder, more desperate, until the sound filled the entire room. It was raw, it was ugly, but it was real. For so long I had tried to be strong, to pretend I was fine, to convince myself that maybe I had imagined it all. But there in the dark, alone with the echo of betrayal, I couldn't hide from it anymore. Strength deserted me, leaving behind nothing but a hollow shell crumbling under the weight of loss. The emotional breakdown wasn't just about Kalen's betrayal, it was about everything it represented. Every promise he had made now felt like a lie, Every word of love he had whispered now sounded like mockery. I thought of the nights I had stayed awake waiting for him, the times I had defended him when others questioned his absences, the way I had believed in him when my instincts screamed otherwise. All of it felt wasted, foolish, as though I had been pouring myself into a vessel already cracked beyond repair. Anger came in flashes, burning through the grief like fire through dry wood. I screamed into the silence, my voice breaking, my throat raw. I wanted to destroy something, anything, just to see the outside world reflect the destruction inside me. My hands grabbed the nearest object, a picture frame of us smiling, frozen in a moment that now felt like a cruel joke, and I hurled it across the room. Glass shattered against the wall, scattering across the floor, tiny shards catching the dim light like stars mocking me from a broken sky. The sound silenced me for a moment, leaving me trembling in the aftermath. My tears slowed, my breath still uneven, but the reality remained unchanged. No matter how much I screamed, no matter how much I broke, the truth was immovable. Kalen had chosen someone else, and in doing so, he had destroyed the version of me that believed love was enough to keep someone faithful, enough to make them stay. As the night dragged on, exhaustion settled over me, heavy and suffocating. My body ached from crying, my voice cracked from screaming, yet my mind refused to rest. Images replayed on loop, his smile, their closeness, the way his eyes lit up in a way they hadn't for me in so long. It was torture, a self-inflicted punishment I couldn't escape. Every blink brought the scene back, every pause in thought filled with the sound of his laughter blending with someone else's. I stared at the ceiling, eyes swollen, the taste of salt lingering on my lips. The silence after the storm was worse than the storm itself. It was empty, hollow, echoing with the absence of the life I thought I had. My heart still beat, my lungs still filled, but everything else felt numb. The world outside went on as if nothing had changed, yet inside me, everything had collapsed. The emotional breakdown stripped me bare, leaving me with nothing but the truth. I wasn't his everything. Maybe I never had been, and no matter how much I had given, how much I had loved, it hadn't been enough to stop him from finding joy in the arms of someone else. Cold betrayal doesn't come with fire. It doesn't scream. It doesn't rage. It doesn't even shatter like glass thrown against a wall. It seeps in like ice, slow and merciless, numbing everything it touches until you realize too late that you can't feel anything at all. With Kalen Dreven, the betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, calculated, and deliberate in a way that made it hurt even more. There was no explosion, no confrontation, just the slow withdrawal of warmth. I saw it in his eyes before I ever heard it in his words. Eyes that once sought me out across a room now slid past me as though I were invisible. He stopped meeting my gaze, stopped reaching for my hand, stopped asking questions that once came so naturally. Every action carried the sharpness of indifference, as if he had already moved on, and I was just the leftover echo of a life he no longer wanted. When he did speak, his words were clipped, efficient, almost businesslike. He wasn't cruel, no, cruelty requires passion. This was worse. This was apathy, the absence of even the smallest spark of care. It was the little things that made the coldness unbearable. He no longer said goodnight with the softness that used to make me feel safe. He no longer asked if I had eaten, no longer remembered the details of my day, no longer offered those small gestures that once wove together the fabric of our bond. I became a ghost in my own relationship, existing in the same space but untouched, unacknowledged, unseen. It was as though he had already buried us, and I was the only one left mourning. When I finally asked him, when I demanded some piece of honesty, his response was like a blade dipped in frost. He didn't yell, didn't defend himself. He simply shrugged, his voice calm, detached, as though the weight of everything we had built was nothing more than dust to him. "Things change," he said, his tone flat, his eyes distant. Those two words cut deeper than any admission of guilt could have, because they carried no regret, no remorse, only finality. That was the coldest betrayal of all. Not that he had chosen someone else, but that he no longer cared enough to even hide it. The secrecy was gone, the pretenses stripped away, and what remained was a man who had already walked away long before I had realized he was gone. He didn't fight to explain. He didn't fight to stay. He didn't fight at all. And in that silence I understood everything. Kalen had turned love into a transaction, affection into obligation, and promises into nothing but empty words spoken to pass the time. The betrayal wasn't a slip of weakness. It was intentional. He had chosen to withhold his love, chosen to invest it elsewhere, chosen to let me watch as he gave to another what he had once given to me. That clarity froze me to my core. Betrayal wrapped itself around me not like fire-consuming flesh, but like ice settling into bone, permanent and unshakable. And perhaps the cruelest part was how easily he lived with it, how he carried on as if nothing had been lost, as if the love I had given was disposable, replaceable, insignificant. I was left with memories that burned like open wounds, while he stood unscathed, his indifference colder than any rage could ever be. Silent revenge is never loud, never messy, never obvious. It doesn't announce itself with fury or chaos. It waits, patient and deliberate, like a shadow creeping across the floor at dusk. After Kaylin Dreven's betrayal had stripped me bare, after the breakdown and the numbness, I thought I would be left with nothing but ruin. But somewhere in that ruin something hardened. The pain stopped feeling like a wound and began to feel like a weapon. I didn't scream at him anymore. I didn't demand explanations or beg for truths he had already decided I didn't deserve. I stopped giving him the satisfaction of watching me crumble. Instead, I became quiet. My silence was not surrender, it was strategy. He thought my stillness meant defeat, but in reality it meant I had stopped playing by his rules. Every word I didn't say, every tear I refused to shed in front of him, was a small piece of power returning to me. Kaylin had taken me for granted, convinced that my world revolved around him, that no matter what he did, I would orbit faithfully in his gravity. My revenge was simple. I would let him believe that. I would let him live in the comfort of thinking he still held me in his hands, while quietly I slipped away. I erased myself from the places he expected me to be. I withdrew the parts of me he had fed on for so long, my trust, my devotion, my vulnerability. I began to rebuild in silence. While he poured himself into another, I poured myself into strength, into a version of me he no longer recognized. He didn't notice at first. Why would he? His attention was elsewhere. But slowly, cracks began to form in his confidence, in the certainty that I would always be waiting. My silence unsettled him. My calm unnerved him. The absence of my voice, my questions, my need, it became louder than any accusation ever could. The beauty of silent revenge is that it leaves no evidence. There are no confrontations, no battles to point to, no scars he can accuse me of leaving. It's simply the slow realization, creeping into his mind when he least expects it, that the person who once gave him everything now gives him nothing at all. The power he once wielded over me dissolves, and he is left grasping for control that no longer exists. And though he will never know the exact moment it began, Kaylin will feel it. He will feel it in the empty spaces where my presence used to be, in the quiet strength I carry when he looks at me and no longer sees the person he once broke. He will feel it in the way I no longer respond, no longer flinch, no longer bend. He will feel it in the silence, the same silence that used to comfort him when he thought it meant compliance, now turned against him, sharp and unyielding. Silent revenge is not about making him suffer the way he made me suffer. It is about reclaiming myself piece by piece in a way he cannot touch. It is about walking away without a word, leaving him with the weight of his own choices, and knowing that the cold emptiness he once left in me will one day come for him, when he realizes what he lost. And when that day comes, he won't hear a sound from me.